What is the weirdest fact you know? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, collard greens, Savoy cabbage, kohlrabi, and gailan are all the same species of plant, Brassica oleracea, just bred to enhance different parts of the plant. Story 2. We don't really know who the inventor of the fire hydrant is because the patent was destroyed in a fire. Story 3. Woodpeckers' tongues wrap around their brain to cushion them from a concussion when they peck against tree trunks. Story 4. A fungi grows next to the highly radioactive elephant's foot in the Chernobyl reactor. It feeds off the gamma rays emitted by the nuclear fuel in a process known as radiosynthesis. If you were exposed to similar levels of radiation, you would have a lethal dose in 3 minutes. Answer. Radiotrophic fungus was first discovered at the Chernobyl site in 1991, just after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the start of internationally aided cleanup containment efforts. Not so sure about right next to the elephant's foot, but it was definitely found growing in large, flourishing colonies all throughout the site's cooling water supply. This fungus appears to use melanin, the same dark brown pigment that gives humans all their various normal skin tones, except in much, much higher concentrations, to power sugar-producing reactions by deriving energy from nuclear decay the same way plants and cyanobacteria use the green pigment chlorophyll to synthesize sugars by deriving energy from sunlight. Basically, this stuff is a mold colony that has the most extreme tan ever and uses it to eat radiation. Similar fungi have been found accumulated on the exterior hulls of low-orbit spacecraft, and experiments were recently, 2018-2019, conducted to begin investigating if the stuff could be used as shielding to protect astronauts from solar cosmic radiation. Apparently, results were promising. Story 5. Titanic was fitted with microphones for receiving underwater bell signals. With this system, the sound of submarine bells was received through the hull of the vessel. Submarine bells, used as fog signals, were located on lightships, at lighthouses, and even on some specially equipped buoys. They were actuated by electric signals, compressed air, or simply by wave motion. Titanic had 2 submarine microphones on her hull, one on each side. These were the ears of the ship. By switching between the port and starboard microphones and comparing the volume of the bells, the navigation officer could determine the direction to the navigation aid. Sound travels much further through water than through air. These bells could be heard over 15 miles away through the headset. A pretty cool way of navigating at a time when GPS and radar didn't yet exist. Story 6. If you want to paint a violin red, you have to use a naphthol or pyrrole red, as a cadmium red pigment is too heavy and will alter the sound. Story 7. Koalas have fingerprints that are very close to human fingerprints. There apparently have been several break-in Australia by the same person based off fingerprint evidence. Turned out to be a koala that was responsible for all of these. Story 8. When caterpillars make their chrysalises, they don't just grow wings change, they dissolve completely into goo, which then reforms into the butterfly. Better yet, if you train the caterpillars to dislike certain stimuli, the resulting butterflies retain that memory will avoid the same stimuli. Answer. I don't have a source to hand, but I asked a relative who works a lot around butterflies. She said that it has actually been shown that they retain some structure during metamorphosis, including their nervous system, which explains the memory retention. Edit. I'm asking her for more info. Edit 2. She doesn't remember telling me anything about that. Maybe I didn't hear it from her, but I did some Googling. This information comes from a 2008 study. On a website I found this. This study has shed some light on the intricacies of metamorphosis. Scientists have now set aside the notion that a caterpillar is completely disintegrated into a blended soup while in its cocoon. Instead, they now agree that it is more likely that certain parts of the brain may remain intact during the transition. The retention of memory in adulthood could be due to the carryover of intact neural connections formed during larval stages. Source. Story 9. Anglerfish mate by the male biting the female's abdomen. Over time, the male is absorbed and linked to the female's circulatory system, while the male basically melts into a parasite-looking growth that is actually nothing but testicles, which the female will use when she's ready. Weird enough for you? Story 10. Tapirs' male body part are not only very large relative to body length, but they are also prehensile, i.e. they can grip and grab. Story 11. Great white sharks have never been seen mating, ever, by anyone. Zero record made by a human. Strange considering what a mighty presence they have on humans. Edit. They've never observed them giving birth either. Thanks folks for the info. Edit. The mating hath commenced. Thanks fellow Redditor. Whilst still not officially observed in the scientific community, there has been an account from a fisherman. Edit. To everyone asking why we can't just put sharks in a tank and observe, no. Great whites are worth more than our curiosity. They have a level of force and mystique that sees them belong only to the ocean. It's been attempted, and they lose their minds very quickly. They're the result of millions of years of predatory evolution, an absolute predator. We will observe only when in the right circumstance at the right time, which is in the wild, in the ocean. Answer. This reminds me of a recent episode of the Memory Palace podcast. It's called Keyhole, and it's about whales. The title comes from a scientist who said, studying these large underwater creatures is like studying humans through a keyhole. You only get the bits that happen as they pass. Edit. Man, this blew up. Thanks for the award. I highly recommend anyone who hasn't listened to the Memory Palace, check it out. Nate DeMeo is a gifted storyteller, and most of the episodes are 15 minutes or shorter. He gives no context when he begins, and any episode notes are minimal, to say the least. A white horse is especially beautiful and a perfect place to start. Story 12. Most rune stones erected by Norsemen were erected by Christians, and they're often decorated with Christian crosses. Runic writing also continued for centuries after conversion, so it's not uncommon to see things like, God help his soul, on runestones. It might not be so weird if one's intimately familiar with the topic, but I think a lot of people just seem to associate runic writing with paganism. Story 13. The Iron Maiden was never a torture device. Some archaeologist a couple hundred years ago just found an old metal coffin that happened to have metal spikes by it, and he just assumed that the spikes belonged on the door of the coffin. Story 14. I just heard this one on No Such Thing as a Fish, so I don't know if it's true. But apparently if you play Tetris for 20 minutes within 6 hours after a traumatic car accident, you'll be 62 less likely to have PTSD, like memories of the event. Answer. It's actually only the flashbacks that seems to diminish. Significantly fewer flashbacks a week later. Playing a visually demanding game hinders the consolidation of the traumatic memory, meaning it messes with the encoding process because your working memory is busy trying to play Tetris. Link to article about it. Actual peer-reviewed journal article at the bottom. Story 15. A whale's fart bubble is so big that you could fit a Volkswagen inside of it. The fart bubble, not the whale. Story 16. If you type Illuminati backwards on your search bar, along with .com, itanamuli.com, it'll take you straight to the NSA website. Story 17. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, published a book in 1922 about how fairies are real, based on some pictures of fairies deemed authentic by an expert. Edit. Well, RIP my inbox. Now my book of useless information is 22 for getting me the most upvoted comments. Story 18. That there was a NASA-funded project in the 60s to teach dolphins to speak English, which managed to involve giving a dolphin handjobs and LSD. Answer. The dolphin who received the handjobs was named Peter, and the woman who supplied the dolphin handies was named Margaret. They lived together on the second floor of a flooded house where she tried to teach him to speak English. It was super weird and unethical. When the project lost funding and Peter and Margaret were separated, Peter ended up eliminating himself. Really sad stuff. Story 19. Moose can dive up to 30 feet underwater to eat vegetation growing there when above ground is covered in snow. Story 20. The CIA spent nearly 5 years and $10 million to make a covert spy cat with implanted microphones to eavesdrop on the Soviets. It was run over and eliminated by a car on its first mission. Answer. I heard the cat made it back safe after a failed mission and had the microphones removed. Update. Apparently it was claimed the cat was hit by a car back in 1960 during its first mission. But in 2013, a guy who oversaw the project disputed that, saying the cat was too difficult to train and had the hardware removed, living a long and happy life afterwards. Story 21. Let's see. The world's shortest war was over in 38 minutes. The longest war was over 300 years. The reason banana-flavored candy doesn't taste like bananas is because the banana we eat today is not the same as the one the flavor was created to mimic. Edit. After several comments have pointed it out, I did some research. It appears that the banana fact I shared isn't accurate. However, I am leaving it because it triggered some wonderful discussions on different banana varieties, including Cavendish and Gros Michel. That was worth the time. Story 22. The skin between muscle and fat is called fascia and looks like a cobweb when pulled from those sections. Edit. By skin, I mean connective tissue. Story 23. You have a ball sack because you need to have your balls at 34 degrees C to produce sperm, but your body is 37 degrees. The sack keeps them farther away. That's also why your balls shrivel when you are cold. Gotta maintain homeostasis. Story 24. There is a species of penguins called Adelie penguins in Antarctica that are so horny they will screw anything. Examples include female penguins, male penguins, injured penguins, dead bodies, dead fish, the freaking ground, basically anything that moves or doesn't move. Edit. My apologies. Phone ATO corrected Antarctica with Arctic. Also, they screw anything that moves and doesn't move. Story 25. There was a genetic bottleneck in standard poodles starting in the 1950s. A kennel called the Wycliffe Kennel line-bred exceptional show dogs which became highly sought after as studs. Even today, many standard poodles carry a substantial percentage from this line, which traces back to just 5 dogs. Story 26. Female bedbugs lack a genital cavity, so the male bedbug has to literally stab his male body part into the female bedbug's stomach. And then when they're done screwing, that's it. But what makes it even more interesting is that bedbugs are unable to tell the difference between other male and female bedbugs. Use your imagination a little for that one. Edit. What the heck? I went to bed and I woke up to find this blew up. Thanks for the awards and upvotes. Answer. Many species of snails and slugs are hermaphroditic, possessing fully functional male and female reproductive characteristics, and go about a similar process. When mating, 2 males will wrestle each other, joust with their male body part. The loser of this contest becomes the quote female in the encounter, gets stabbed by the winner's male body part, and is impregnated. Story 27. All mammals over 3 kilograms, 6.5 pounds, pee for an average of 21 seconds with a full bladder, independent of body size. From a 2014 paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, using high-speed videography and flow rate measurement obtained at Zoo Atlanta, we discover that all mammals above 3 kilograms in weight empty their bladders over nearly constant duration of 21-13 secs. This feat is possible because larger animals have longer urethras and thus higher gravitational force and higher flow speed. Smaller mammals are challenged during urination by high viscous and capillary forces that limit their urine to single drops. Our findings reveal that the urethra is a flow-enhancing device, enabling the urinary system to be scaled up by a factor of 3,600 in volume without compromising its function. This study may help to diagnose urinary problems in animals, as well as inspire the design of scalable hydrodynamic systems based on those in nature. Source: Story 28. Your anus comprises either 35 or 37 creases, resulting in a pattern as unique as your fingertips. This discovery, first made by Salvador Dali, allowed for the development of an anus-examining smart toilet. On the same topic, it turns out that humans are deuterostomes. This means that at the start of its development, an embryo goes through a stage during which its tissue folds back over itself, creating something called a blastopore. As maturation continues, this blastopore becomes the anus. In short, you can make the argument that every person is an overgrown and unique jerk. Story 29. Technically speaking, a male ballet dancer is a ballerino. Also, a single strand of spaghetti is a spaghetto. Spaghetto is also my favorite term for a rough Italian neighborhood. Story 30. The Stegosaurus was extinct for about 90 million years before Tyrannosaurus showed up, and the Tyrannosaurus has been extinct for about 65 million years. We are much closer in time to the T-Rex than the T-Rex was to Stegosaurus. Also, Cleopatra was born closer to our time than she was to the building of the pyramids. Our perception of time is funny. Story 31. The average human arousal has roughly about 130 milliliters of blood in it, while the average rabbit has about 126 milliliters in its entire body. So, there is more blood in your boner than in a bunny. Story 32. Sharks are older than trees. A lot older. 40 million years older. www.zmesscience. Trees, as we familiarly know them today, a primary trunk, large height, crown of leaves or fronds, didn't appear on the planet until the late Devonian period, some 360 million years ago. You might be surprised to learn that sharks are older than trees, as they've been around for at least 400 million years. Weirder, I understand all coal formed during the time after trees appeared, but before the bacteria that breaks them down after they fell. No new coal has formed in a very long time. 100 million years? We have found evidence that wood and wood eaters evolved at the same time. Coal is produced by protecting plant matter from decay via burying it in mud or submerging it in anoxic water. You can actually see modern coals being formed today in peat bogs. Story 33. HEK 293 cells. A scientist named Alex van der Eebe in Netherlands made immortal cells from the liver of an aborted human fetus in the 70s. Those cells have been producing our vaccines for the last 50 years. I don't mean to spread this as misinformation or as any correlation to the current pandemic. It's just a super weird fact I knew. Edit. Seems like I got the organ wrong. It was kidney and not liver cells. Answer. A little bit more on HEK 293 cells. They are called HEK 293 because they are derived from human embryonic kidney cells and were the 293rd experiment conducted that gave rise to the immortal cell line. Also, on top of being used for vaccines, they are used to make a ton of different substances based on gene therapy, since they are so easily able to be transfected to produce adenoviral vectors. Story 34. This is gonna get NSFW, but anyway, the scar that guys have between their legs that connects the scrotum to the anus, that was supposed to be the female body part that closed up when we developed as a fetus. Story 35. If you're cold and shivers but your testicles are hanging low, you have a fever. Edit. Holy cow, I didn't expect this comment to gain such traction. Thank you all for the upvotes, comments, and awards. So to answer the most common question, I was on Yahoo Answers years and years ago for some laughs and came across that information. I had to look it up and turned out it was true. So even though you're freezing with chills and shivers, they continue to hang low, since your body temperature is higher than normal. Story 36. Most Irish flags are wrong. Here's why they're made in Chinese factories in large numbers and made to the most common flag size, 2:3 length ratio. But the Irish flag is a 1:2 ratio. We've got a longer than usual flag, but not many flag factories, so most flags here are wrong, but that's kind of common. Any American flags produced in those same factories are wrong too. Answer. In the same vein, most people think about the brighter, media-friendly version of the French flag when they picture our tricolor. In reality, this version is only used for TV purposes or mass production, so that's why you can see it in crowds and stadiums. The actual flag of France is darker, with lower contrast, and frankly, way better looking. Here are both versions. Story 37. The Schwarzschild radius of a human is 10 to the minus 23 power centimeters. That means that if an average-sized human is pressed into a space with a radius of 0.0000000000001 centimeters, they'd become a black hole. Story 38. The world's most dense organism is a tree named Pando LOL that has just cloned itself across approximately 100 acres. Story 39. If someone asks for weird facts on Reddit, the majority of them are about animal male body part or animal mating. Story 40. American shoe sizes are measured in barley inches, defined as the length of 3 ears of barley corn, whereas UK shoes are measured in industrial inches, defined as 25.39 millimeters. Story 41. If you were an Egyptian pharaoh and immortal making $10,000 a day, you still wouldn't have as much money as the richest man on earth today. Story 42. The only vehicle in all Commonwealth countries that could legally pass a hearse, funeral car, was the Queen's Post, mail courier. Not the police, not a fire truck, ambulance, nothing. Not sure if this is still true anymore. Story 43. Banana slugs do something called apophylation, which means they make themselves female by chewing off their own male body part. Story 44. I don't know if this is a weird fact, but Jacques Villeneuve is so far the only F1 world champion that during his career, no F1 drivers were eliminated in F1-related accidents. Story 45. Human beings need vitamin K to survive. Vitamin K is produced by bacteria in the human large intestine. Vitamin K is absorbed in the small intestine. The large intestine follows the small intestine in human anatomy. Story 46. On the first Foo Fighters album, Dave Grohl was the only member of the band and he played every instrument. Story 47. I have a few. 1. Mantis shrimp can punch with the force of a .22 caliber bullet. 2. Charlie Chaplin once placed third in a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. 3. Finland is the metal capital of the world, having the most metal bands per capita. 4. General Douglas MacArthur had an extremely elaborate plan to win the Korean War in no more than 10 days, consisting of about 50 tactical nukes, 2 U.S. Marine divisions, about 1,500 to 2,000 South Korean troops, and irradiating the entire northern border of North Korea with cobalt, which can last for 60 to 120 years. Story 48. The difference between cake and biscuits, cookies, is that cake hardens when it goes stale, while biscuits soften when stale. This was presented as evidence in a 1991 UK tax trial by makers of Jaffa cakes, who argued their confection was not cake, as the name would imply, but biscuits, and should therefore be taxed at that rate. They won the case. Answer. Your biscuit cake staleness test is right, but the rest of the fact is actually the other way around. Cakes weren't taxed, as they were considered a staple food, but biscuits were, as they were considered a luxury item. Jaffa cakes argued that they were in fact a cake and not a biscuit. They won. Link to UK government website talking about the back and forth ruling, eventually settling on cake. Story 49. Sea otters steal seal pups and violation them to passing. I used to work in sea otter rehabilitation. Story 50. The human brain has the same consistency as warm butter. Now take a moment to think about brain surgery with this new information. Edit. I have been informed that it's more like Jell-O than warm butter. My point still stands though, because both are pretty soft and squishy and easy to cut through. Story 51. If you have 30 or more people in a room, there's like a 75% chance that at least 2 of them will have the same birthday. Story 52. Centipedes can eat human flesh. That makes them even more scary, even though I didn't know that was possible. Imagine sleeping and waking up to a centipede eating you. Story 53. I don't remember the exact year, but around the World War, the U.S. military dumped a shoot-ton of metallic needles into the ionosphere to facilitate radio communications. Story 54. Sloths don't sweat, and because of this don't have a smell. Any smell that comes from a sloth originates from debris in their fur, and not them specifically. Another fun one, there's no such thing as a seagull. There's plenty of types of gulls, but there is no actual species named seagull. No one knows that one. Story 55. Japanese women breast size are getting bigger. A study showed that they've been increasing for 40 years straight. By 2018, they were 50 bigger than back in the 80s. Story 56. This probably won't be seen, but most birds can't suck up water to drink it. They have to tip their beak into the water, then tip their beak back to let the collected water run down their throats. Pigeons are capable of sucking up their water, though, and some overly enthusiastic drinkers will dunk their whole heads underwater. Story 57. Humans taste like pork, according to a tribe of Polynesian cannibals. The word they use for human means long pig. Story 58. France's longest border is shared with Brazil. It takes more power and fuel to go from Earth to the Sun than it does to go from Earth to Pluto to the Sun. Story 59. World War I was famously initiated by the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. The assassin responsible tried to bomb the carriage the Archduke and his wife were in, but mistimed it, so he ran away and blended in with the crowd. During the obvious commotion, Ferdinand's coach driver tried to take a shortcut through a back street, but found it blocked by people too, so had to perform a U-turn. By chance, the place he did it was outside of a cafe, where the assassin had decided to lay low and pretend that none of this was anything to do with him. So imagine his luck when his actual target started fudge around, trying to turn his car around and go back down a random little street right in front of him. So he promptly loaded his gun and shot the man dead. World War I, and by extension WW2, was the result of a random coach driver getting caught in traffic. Story 60. Posted this a while back, but it aligns with my interests, so here goes. The Russians, especially among the nobility aristocracy, were devotees of intimacy, foot tickling. They had learned it from the Tartar tribes. Foot tickling for intimacy arousal was used in the Muscovite palaces' courts for centuries. Many of the Tsarinas, Catherine the Great, Anna Ivanovna, Elizabeth, Anna Leopoldovna, others, were ardent participants. In fact, the practice was so popular that eunuchs women were employed as full-time foot ticklers. They developed this unique skill so well that their occupations brought prestige, good pay. Anna Leopoldovna had no fewer than 6 ticklers at her feet, though more were employed to serve the other ladies of the court. The foot tickling was usually done on the private boudoirs. While the ticklers performed their task, they also told bawdy stories, sang obscene ballads, thus creating a sort of orgiastic atmosphere. All this, of course, was to work the ladies up to an erotic pitch so that they could meet their husbands or lovers in an intimacy, impassioned mood. It wasn't uncommon for these women to experience orgasms while being foot tickled. The Intimacy, Life of the Foot Shoe by William A. Rossi have practiced this with daring women over the years and can attest to its hysterically climactic efficacy. Story 61. Medical scientists have used fish skin to surgically create female body part in women who would otherwise lack them. It's possible to remove the cells from the fish skin while leaving the collagen matrix that held those cells together intact. Story 62. Generally, the price of frozen pork belly, bacon, futures skyrockets once per year. In August, coinciding with the ripeness of Jersey tomatoes. For BLTs. Story 63. Kentucky Fried Chicken was actually created in Utah, but when Colonel Sanders visited Utah, he decided to call it Kentucky Fried Chicken, since he was from Kentucky. Story 64. In the early 1980s, the Naval Investigative Service was investigating homosexuality in the Chicago area. Agents discovered that gay men sometimes referred to themselves as Friends of Dorothy. Unaware of the historical meaning of the term, the NIS believed that there actually was a woman named Dorothy at the center of a massive ring of homosexual military personnel, so they launched an enormous and futile hunt for the elusive Dorothy, hoping to find her and convince her to reveal the names of gay service members. Story 65. Fidel Castro was utterly obsessed with milk. He was on record for one meal, eating a total of 18 scoops of ice cream. He had a good portion of money set up for it, actually. Copalia, which is the size of a city block and still one of the most well-functioning government structures in Cuba, was commissioned by Castro himself. There was also a notable incident in which he nearly eliminated a French dignitary over a disagreement regarding Camembert superiority. His obsession ran so deep that Cuba had to import Holsteins from Canada to keep up with his demand. You see, Cuban cows, while hardy, do not produce large quantities of sweet milk. Holsteins, however, produce lots. But it was too hot and many died of heat stroke, while those who lived did not have it in them to lactate with vigor. Using the people's funds, Castro's establishment set up a cooling facility for the Holsteins, where they could be corralled and milked in relative comfort. Still, they were stressed, too stressed to make a return on their enormous cost. Outraged, Castro set his sights even higher. He began genetic experimentation via crossbreeding to create a hybrid cow that could survive extreme heat while enduring the burden of massive milkers. His madness eventually bore fruit. A mutt named Ubra Blanca was the culmination of his efforts. Resistant to heat and capable of producing 110 liters of freak cream in a day, it was a masterclass in mammaries. The Frankentitty survived for 13 years as a national symbol of Cuba. She was stuffed and placed behind glass, her DNA sampled for cloning, and a marble monument commissioned in her honor were what marked her passing, along with a change in the national stamp and federal newspaper. Castro never soared this high again. At some point, he toyed with the notion of hydroponic grass patches in every Cuban household that would be complemented by dog-sized cows. It was ambitions, but alas, never saw fruition, as Ubre Blanca did. Castro is known for a lot of things. He took over Cuba. He almost blew up Florida. He slept with several different women every day. He was a symbol of terror, oppression, fear-mongering, and revolution throughout the entire world. But he was also a man who really, really loved milk. Story 66. A duck is one of only 3 of birds with a male body part, and their junk is fudge insane. It shoots out in the shape of a corkscrew and has ridges and backward-facing spines like sticker bushes. Fudge that, not literally. Here's where evolution is 100 a real thing. BC, over time, female ducks have developed a sort of chastity belt from these vicious duck male body parts. See, a pair of ducks usually mate for the entire season. But to make matters worse, male ducks turn into violation-y assholes when they're horny. No pun intended. I just realized there's already over 3K comments, so people probably won't see this. But if you did, I hope you enjoyed my little tidbit about duck male body part, smola. Story 67. Manatees are the main source of believed mermaid sightings. They also have a female body part somewhat similar to that of a human. So all of those stories of fishermen being seduced by mermaids. Yup, fucking manatees. Katic. Okay, so for y'all asking how I learned this fact, because apparently Reddit is for trying to trash people's funny comments. In high school, we did a really long, detailed assignment about origins of mythological creatures. My friend chose mermaids, and this is part of what he found. Story 68. Opossums have remained largely unchanged by evolution. That is, to the male having a forked male body part and the female having a two-channeled female body part. Story 69. Quite literally, every single thing in existence that you're aware of is fetishized by someone out there. For example, I've heard of people who self-care to Google images of planets. Story 70. The male body part and the clitoris, the erectile tissue of women, are practically the same in structure, with different distributions of tissues. Story 71. In the Middle Ages, doctors knew about diabetes. However, there was no effective way to test for blood sugar, so they had to test your urine instead. Diabetes was referred to as the honey disease because honey was the most common way to sweeten meals in Europe, and that sweetness would proceed to your urine and make it taste like honey if you had high blood sugar. So yeah, if you were a nobleman in the Middle Ages, your doctor would be taste testing your urine to make sure it wasn't too sweet. Story 72. Blobfish are not as ugly as their pictures would suggest. They look like that because they live deep within the ocean, and as they are reeled up, they undergo catastrophic decompression, eliminate them, and making them look like a gross blob of silly putty. Story 73. Queen, the band, is worth more than the Queen. This was after Bohemian Rhapsody. Queen, $600 million. The Queen, $486 million. Story 74. A male hippo's mating call is to go in a body of water, surrounded by females, and then proceeding to poop and spin their tails. The more the poop flies around and gets scattered, the more attractive the male hippo is to the females. Story 75. The more body fat you have, the smaller your male body part. As you lose body fat, your male body part begins to look longer. This is because we can't actually see the entirety of our male body part. Some of it is hidden behind fat, and naturally, as you lose fat, there is less for the male body part to hide behind, and it appears larger. So don't worry, you're packing even if it doesn't look like it. Story 76. That it's illegal to push a tipsy moose out of a plane in Canada, which leads me to believe it's not illegal to push a sober moose. This fact was told me too when I was a wee Canadian babe and may not be right anymore. Story 77. William the Conqueror and Henry VIII's bodies both exploded at their funerals due to how fat they were, and the gases had nowhere to go. Story 78. The showing of the glands of the male body part was considered a massive embarrassment in Greek Olympics, so the participants used to tie their foreskin with a string to avoid the skin to be pulled back, thus exposing the glands. Story 79. Just learned this one today. NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys both officially had 6 members. The guy who organized those groups insisted on being designated as a member of the bands. The members, despite making that dude millions of dollars, lived on a $25 per diem. They eventually had to take the guy to court to get their earned money. At one point, after having earned producer dude over $100 million in album sales, he took them all to dinner and gave them checks for their earnings, $10,000 each. Probably not weird compared to most facts here, but having grown up with those guys being as successful as they were, so much radio airtime, to think they were more poorer than you are blew my mind. Story 80. If you see something in the corner of your eye and look at it and it's gone, it could still be there. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes. The most I ever got, lol. Answer. This is particularly true at night. The science is the difference between rods and cones in your eye. Cones are towards the middle of the retina and are more sensitive to color, but the rods are around the edges and are more sensitive to light, or something like that. A good trick if you see a thing or of the corner of your eye at night is to look next to it or near it instead. You might see it. I used to use this trick at sea and it works pretty well. Story 81. There is a species of mite where all the males die before they're born. They basically practice asexual reproduction. A mother will have several females and one male. In some species, the male mates with his sisters immediately after birth, then dies. In other species, the male mates with his sisters before birth, then dies shortly after birth without really doing anything. And yes, there's even a species for which the male mates with his sisters and dies before birth. Oh yeah, and birth usually means eating their way out of the mother's body. Adactylidium. See, The Panda's Thumb by Stephen Jay Gould. Story 82. Tasmanian devils like to sleep inside the carcasses of their prey. They eat it, fall asleep in it, and when they wake up, they continue to eat. Story 83. Beavers have two sets of lips, one in front of the teeth and one behind. This means that they can carry a stick in their teeth without drowning. Story 84. Male giraffes will headbutt a female in the bladder until she urinates, then it tastes the pee to help it determine whether or not the female is ovulating. Answer. Aye, girl. You're looking fine. Aw, aren't you sweet? You know it. And you know what else is sweet? He. I have an idea. Yeah, let me go ahead and just, whack you in the stomach, yeah? Do it. Aw, yeah. Girl, you are, hey. What the hell? What's wrong? Aw, hell, no. I'm not ready to be a dad. I was just looking for a bit of fun. We could always, use protection. How am I supposed to get it on? We have hooves. I figured you could, use a mongoose or something. Darn, girl, you're nasty. Story 85. A million seconds is about 11 days, whereas a billion seconds is closer to 33 years. Billionaires should pay more tax. Story 86. Alaska is the northernmost, easternmost, and westernmost state because the Aleutian Islands cross the international date line. Story 87. Garrus Vakarian from Mass Effect has a spiral male body part similar to a duck. Thanks for that Mass Effect character designer whose name I can't remember. Story 88. Earthworms are hermaphrodites. When two worms mate, they fight for penetration. The first worm to penetrate the other becomes the male, whereas the worm being penetrated becomes the female. In rare instances, both will penetrate at the same time, resulting in dual fertilization. Story 89. That you can tell the temperature with cricket chirps. Count the number of cricket chirps you hear in 14 seconds, then add 40 to that number. Story 90. When a starfish opens a clam, it launches its whole stomach inside out and slowly devours the clam from the inside of its own shell. Story 91. Most of the water in our solar system isn't on Earth. It's on Jupiter's moon, Europa. Europa is one giant ocean of 10 kilometers deep, 6.2 miles. Europa is also covered by a 2-kilometer sheet of ice. Short introduction to Europa because it's a pretty nice place. It's smaller than the moon. The water under the ice is liquid because tidal waves from Jupiter rip its core apart, and this generates heat. The ice also protects Europa from lethal cosmic radiation. It's one of the places which most likely has life. Story 92. Want to know what ducks do when they get extremely bored? They become cannibals. Have fun looking at a duck the same way ever again. Story 93. The first person to fly a powered aircraft in Australia was Harry Houdini. Mr. T survived T-cell lymphoma. Story 94. If doctors have to remove a bit of your skull because your brain is swelling dangerously, they can store it in the omentum, the stuff that connects all your organs, which is very nutrient-rich, in your gut. The gut tissue then keeps the skull dura alive until it can be reattached up top. Source: AMMD. Story 95. There is a single black hole that has a larger mass than all of the stars in the entire Milky Way combined. Story 96. Most of the current monarchs of Europe, Elizabeth II, King of Spain, etc., are cousins. They are descendants of Queen Victoria. Story 97. Because Magellan died in the Philippines before completing his circumnavigation of the globe, the acting captain Juan Elcano was actually the highest-ranking member to complete the journey. Story 98. Oh, have you heard the euphemism beaver in place of female body part? That comes from the little pubic wigs French prostitutes would wear in place of the actual body hair they shaved off in attempt to avoid VD or crabs. The wigs were made of beaver fur. Story 99. Pirates didn't wear eye patches just to look cool or because they lost an eye. They actually wore it so one eye is already conditioned to the dark, so at night they lift the patch and can see the ocean better in the dark with that one eye. You can try this at home by just covering one eye for a minute in light and turning the lights off and uncovering that eye. you'll notice a difference in both eyes. Story 100. That the longest word in the English language is pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. It's 45 letters long and is a disease of the lungs caused by inhaling silica dust. I've known this since I was in elementary school because my brother had to do a project on a long word and he did this one. Story 101. The Catholic Church has a policy that a land discovered falls under the authority of the bishop from where the expedition departed, which means the moon is under the control of the Bishop of Florida. Story 102. There's enough sugar in a bottle can of Coca-Cola that you can vomit, but there's another ingredient in the beverage that distracts your stomach. Story 103. Ian McKellen's "You Shall Not Pass" shout in LOTR is legendary, but he admits he got the line completely wrong and regrets it to this day. It was written as "You cannot pass," but he said "shall not" instead. One of the greatest lines in movie history, and it was a mistake. Story 104. Male snakes have two male body parts called a hemipenis or hemipenes. They often have fleshy spikes on them that form specific patterns. You can actually identify specific species based on the fleshy spike placement. Story 105. If adult beverage is ingested through your jerk, you will get tipsy 3 times quicker. This is because the adult beverage goes straight into your bloodstream without going through your liver or your digestive system. Story 106. A region in Germany called East Frisia, Ostfriesland, consumes the most tea per person each year, 300 liters. Story 107. The most posted random facts on here are 1. About fitting a raccoon up your jerk. 2. Ducks corkscrew male body part. And 3. Wombats shoot in cubes. So yeah, humanity. Jerk, male body part, and poop. Story 108. In medieval times, all of the architecture was built so that if you were ever attacking an enemy, it would make swinging your sword or weapon more difficult if you were right-handed. Stairwells, walls, fortifications were all built to slow down a right-handed enemy. Story 109. Scuba divers fall into the water backwards from the side of the boat because if they fell forwards, they'd land in the boat. Story 110. The third tentacle of an octopus is actually a male body part. This is why some species of octopi rip their tentacle off and throw it at the females. Pigs have a corkscrew male body part, and it is possible to have one born with one that twists the wrong way, meaning you could literally need an adapter for mating purposes. Also, the males are the ones that have the prolonged climax. Prairie dogs are softcore adult content stars. They technically touch teeth to identify each other. In zoos, people think they are kissing, and the prairie dogs realize this and enjoy the attention. So now they kiss and cuddle for crowds. Story 111. The first known visual depiction of the crucifixion of Christ is an incredibly crude drawing of Jesus with a donkey head on the cross, with another figure kneeling before him, with a caption that translates to, "Alexamenos worships his God," that was presumably drawn by a pubescent boy making fun of his weird classmate for being Christian. Story 112. The human anus can stretch to 8 inches, and a raccoon can fit in a 4-inch hole. Take that how you want. Story 113. The oldest written joke in the world is a fart joke written by the Egyptians, or the fact that Egyptians used to waz their teeth with human and animal piss. Story 114. If you took a spider web thread and wrapped it around the earth, the entire thread would weigh the same as a can of soup. Story 115. There were multiple studies to use the Brazilian wandering spider's venom in erectile dysfunction medication. The bite can cause someone to have an hours-long, extremely uncomfortable arousal. Because of this, some fancy scientists had the thought to use the spider's venom to treat ED, since apparently 1 in 3 men with ED don't respond to Viagra. Don't know if it went anywhere or not, but yeah. Story 116. Platypus make their own milk and lay eggs, so they are one of the only animals that can make their own cake. Story 117. All sea serpent sightings, except Loch Ness, because that's a loch, are probably just sailors seeing a whale flipping upside down and sticking its massive and serpent-shaped arousal out of the water. Story 118. Animals sometimes have bad eyesight like humans do. In the wild, they tend to die because they can't recognize threats or run into trees or off cliffs, etc. In captivity domestication, they tend to be considered less bright or more easily startled. I'm not sure how weird this is. I mean, it makes sense, but it's not something we think about, is it? Story 119. To hide a corpse, you should bury it vertically in a forest and then bury a dead animal over it. Most searches will stop digging where the dog spotted if they find a dead animal. The freshly moved soil might give you away, so a pet and a cross to make it look like a ceremonial is a plus. Story 120. In English, there is a word for throwing someone out of the window. It's defenestration. But no, we have to say the day after tomorrow. Story 121. A group of otters is called a raft. The rabbit noses that look like two hooks back to back is called a split lip because it's literally part of their lips. Their lip is split in half on top to let them have a better hold on leaves as they chew. Tamerlane, third powerful ruler of Mongolian Empire, had his mom help him lie his way into power, legitimacy issued due to no blood claim on role as chieftain, by saying he was a descendant of the Genghis Khan. His tomb was a tower in Russia, and he warned that if anyone disturbed his grave, something catastrophic would happen to them. So for hundreds of years, the tomb laid untouched, and a village sprang up near it. A few Soviet Union came by to investigate the tower, and was warned by the villagers to stay away or face the consequences. They laughed it off and went in. About a week later, Hitler invaded. Millions died. Coincidence? I don't know. Believe what you will. This story I learned in AP World was just one of the fun facts that popped up in my head. Edit it since someone fact-checked and pointed out it's just hundreds, not thousands of years. Sorry, was tired, LOL. Story 122. Mario Kart Arcade GP. A slightly obscure entry in the Mario Kart series has a picture of the Beslan school hostage crisis, used to test the game's camera system that takes a snapshot of your face to display in-game. The event in question was a hostage situation lasting 3 days in the Russian territory of North Ossetia, Alania. The reason why the camera test would use a picture of an incredibly deadly school shooting that was downloaded only days after the incident is strange. Story 123. There is so much space between our solar system and the next closest one that when the Andromeda Galaxy, with its billion of stars, smashes into our Milky Way, our solar will be virtually unscathed. Story 124. Squirrels can survive terminal velocity, so no matter how high they fall from, they'll probably survive. Story 125. Pearls can dissolve in vinegar. Only learned this because my country has a gum brand with facts on its wrappers. Story 126. Duck male body part is shaped like a corkscrew. The first human invention to break the sound barrier was a whip. When cracked right, the tip goes way faster than sound, and the sound it makes is actually a tiny sonic boom. Most koalas have chlamydia. Story 127. Barnacles have the largest male body part to body ratio. Their male body part can be 50 times larger than their body in order to reach the ladies. Story 128. When anglerfish mate, the male bites into the female's belly and latches until his body fuses with hers. Nature is wild. Story 129. African forest elephants are the smallest elephant. They have straight tusks and are darker than bush elephants. African bush elephants are the biggest and have curved tusks. Also, the African bush elephant has the least amount of toenails. While Asian and forest elephants both have 5 front toenails and 4 back toenails, the bush elephant only has 4 front toenails and 3 back toenails. Story 130. Turtles can breathe out of their jerk. Brain has the consistency of hot butter. Doom was set in 2021. A man doused by lethal radiation in the Fukushima nuclear accident was kept alive, against his will, for over 80 days before he had 3 heart stoppages in a day and finally died. Take your pick. I know some weird shoot. Story 131. The color purple was originally made from a type of sea snail, and that it smelled horrible. Despite this, it was so rare and expensive, it was used exclusively by royalty as a mark or wealth and power. Non-royals wearing the color could be jailed or even eliminated. Story 132. A male lion can mate up to 20 times a day. A female lion in heat up to 30. So when the female in heat is unsatisfied, but the male is toward as fudge, she bites his balls to make him get back on track. Also, polar bears' skins are actually black. Story 133. The phobia of long words is called hippopotamonstrosequipedaliophobia, and I can spell it by memory. Myelin. Story 134. A Welsh tipsy committed tragic end, and thanks to Operation Mincemeat, made the Nazis think the Allies were invading Greece, not Sicily. Story 135. Platypuses, specifically their fur, glow when exposed to UV light, and when they do, looks similar to Perry the platypus, bluish-green. Story 136. After they started using helmets in war, etc., more people were brought to the hospital with head injuries because they survived. Story 137. Banana boxes are in a class of their own when it comes to cardboard boxes. They're double reinforced, can support up to 400 pounds, the corners before the corners give out, are sprayed with a natural insecticide to keep bugs away, and interlock with one another. They're also free if you just ask for them at the produce department of your local grocery, but Costco is the most generous about giving them out. Story 138. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, and kale all come from the same plant, Brassica oleracea, a mustard plant. Story 139. The first bomb dropped on Berlin in the Two World War didn't eliminate any humans, but the only elephant in Berlin Zoo. Story 140. In the 70s, some serious studies and researches were done to see if things like telepathy, fortune-telling, witchcraft, and magic could be used as weapons for the U.S. Army. The CIA hired a bunch of magicians, mystics, and seers to put their abilities to test. Story 141. If you're cold, go pee. Your body is spending a ton of energy keeping all that water warm. Don't wear all clothes in your sleeping bag. It'll end up being worse for you. Make sure you aren't breathing into your sleeping while you sleep, even though your face is cold. The condensation from your breath, and you'll wake up in a frozen little icebox. Story 142. Some humans, males, who have XYY chromosome, are said to commit more crimes. The extra Y chromosome is the reason. It's called criminal syndrome. Story 143. The lowest reported lethal dose for water administered anally to a rabbit is 450,000 mg/kg. For a human woman, it is 180,000 mg/kg over a 28-hour period. Story 144. A praying mantis' motive for self-preservation is controlled by his brain, but the thrusting movements for mating are controlled by a nerve ganglion in his abdomen. So if she bites his head off during mating, he will go at it with wild abandon. Story 145. Photons, electrons, and other subatomic particles seem to behave as if they are conscious during certain experiments and are affected by the human mind. Story 146. A certain African leader made public flatulence illegal for some time. I learned this while searching Culture of Flatulence. Story 147. This one's bizarre. There's a thing called teratoma, which is a rare type of a tumor that can grow more complex organs tissues, like teeth, hair, bone, and muscles, even eyes. Don't Google. Story 148. Alligators' intimacy is determined by the degrees in the water the eggs lay in. 35 degrees upwards, all females. 34 degrees and lower, all males. Apparently, it has something to do with alligators lacking intimacy-decided chromosomes. I don't remember exactly. Story 149. You cannot tickle yourself. Try it. I am over 50 years old and only found this out last year, which is slightly embarrassing. Story 150. 1. The rock comprising the peak of Mount Everest is sedimentary rock that formed many thousands of feet below the seabed of the Indian Ocean. 2. Ice ages result not from cold winters but from cool summers. Story 151. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un's grandfather, is still legally head of state in North Korea, despite having died in 1994. Story 152. Loch Ness is so deep, you could fit the population of the whole world times 10 into it. Edit. Spelling. Story 153. You can torture someone with a spoon by continually tapping them in the same spot with a spoon, like light, consistent tapping over an extended period of time with the round side. Skin will turn red before eventually turning into a bruise, where the meat becomes slightly more hurt with each tap, with virtually no damage to nerves so you feel all of it. Story 154. It would take around a year for the average person to save enough of their shed skin to bake a cake, less time if their friends are contributing. Story 155. When a monetary system was added to a monkey enclosure in the form of coins and a fruit vending machine, some female monkeys began giving intimacy favors for the coins TLDR, brass monkeys. Story 156. Whale vomit is rare and expensive. A guy near where I live found several kilos on the beach and sold it for $400K. Story 157. The people of Hartlepool are nicknamed Monkey hangers. During the Napoleonic War, a French ship wrecked off the coast. The only survivor was a monkey dressed in a miniature French naval uniform. Because the townsfolk didn't know what monkeys were and had never seen a Frenchman, they had a trial, found him guilty, and hung him. Story 158. Chocolate is poisonous to everything, including humans. We just eat it in small amounts. 21 pounds is the lethal dose for a human to die of chocolate poisoning. Story 159. Before the cult called Heaven's Gate committed ritual tragic end, the leader Marshall Applewhite made his followers wear identical black tracksuits and matching black and white Nike Decades. The reason for those shoes in particular was because he got a good deal on them if he bought in bulk. Also, chances are good that if you come across a website from around that time, it was designed partially or entirely by the cult. Web design was their main source of funding. Story 160. Platypus are venomous. Sloths' metabolism can slow down so much they can stave to passing on a full stomach. In Japan, you can buy peaches wearing little underwear. Humans have 2 sets of eyelids. Cats have developed a type of purr specifically to annoy humans. Killer whales are dolphins. 29.3% of the world's population are under 18. The Statue of Liberty was originally copper-colored because it's made from copper, but has turned green due to oxidization. Earth is the only known planet where fire can burn due to the amount of oxygen in our atmosphere. Story 161. Hitler had 1 testicle, or the reason you see random colors when you touch your eyes is because that's how the visual nerves pick up touch. Story 162. One predator of whales is the seagull. Those birds are opportunistic omnivores and will land on whales just chilling on the surface in order to peck out chunks of their skin and flesh. This can actually do serious damage to younger whales, if I recall correctly. So, if you want to protect the whales, let those flying bastards have your fries. Otherwise, they'll go after those lovable, gentle giants. Story 163. The first thing that is developed in a human being in the womb is the anus. Every human being was just in jerk at one point. Story 164. Pepper in the Middle Ages were a luxury item, so you can basically just pay rent and taxes with pepper. Story 165. Bears use butt plugs to hibernate through the winter without shoot themselves. The butt plugs are self-made as a result of munching on pine cones and sticks prior to hibernation. Story 166. If you assume the equator is a perfect circle, then if rope went around the equator of the Earth and you needed to raise the rope 2 feet above the surface of the Earth around the equator, you would only need to add about 12.5 feet to the length of the rope. Actually, that's the case for any circle, as the circumference would increase by 4 pi. Story 167. There are 4 kinds of people in the world. 1. Those whose pee smells after they eat asparagus and they can smell it. 2. Those whose pee smells but they can't smell it. 3. Those whose pee doesn't smell, but they can smell when someone else pee does. 4. Those who pee doesn't smell, and they can't smell it when someone else's pee does. Story 168. Buffalo, 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 buffalo. That is a grammatically correct sentence. Story 169. Babies born prematurely are given caffeine in the NICU to help them breathe easier. From what I remember, it stimulates their brain so the baby doesn't stop breathing. My son was on caffeine for at least 4 weeks. Story 170. I don't think other people would think it's too weird, but I'm blown away by the fact that when Jesus was on trial to see who gets hung, the guy most people know as Barabbas was also named Jesus. Yup, both of their names were Jesus, or Yeshua, better translated as Joshua. Jesus Barabbas literally translates to Jesus, Son of the Father. The coincidence of this confused early Christians as well. Story 171. Uteruses is the original 3D printers. All mothers are bodybuilders. Lego people live in houses made of their flesh. Spicy is the only flavor your butt can taste. If humans are 70 water, doesn't that make us chunky soup? If your butt crack was sideways, your cheeks would clap every time you go downstairs. Gravestones are participation rewards. Deaf people doesn't know that farting makes a noise. Beds are just body shelves. If Adam and Eve fought, isn't it World War? 2070 is closer than 1970. Milk is the only bodily fluid we are allowed to drink in public. If you say Jesus backwards, it's sausage. The objective of golf is to play less golf. Nothing you see is real. It's just a recreation of what your brain thinks it looks like. Right now, you're being watched by yourself from future you through memories. If you clean a vacuum cleaner, You are now a vacuum cleaner. The first person to say cool must have been really cool, because everyone around them started using it. Adult beverage is a solution. Some people in the world is still it from a game of tag. Life is a intimacy-transmitted disease. Story 172. Eating your own boogers can help boost your immune system. Eating someone else's boogers is better, confirmed by a doctor. Story 173. When London Zoo first opened in 1828, you could get free entry if you bought a cat or dog to feed to the lions. Story 174. A dude told me once that Limerick, Ireland was the screwdriver stabbing capital of the world. Probably not true, but he was Irish, so what the hell? Story 175. A squirrel would have to fall 4,200 kilometers to die of starvation instead of hitting the ground, because they can survive terminal velocity. Story 176. The reason all images of UFO have such bad quality is because if they had good quality, they could identify them, thus making it no longer an unidentified flying object. Story 177. In American Sign Language, to say pasteurized milk, you move your hand from left to right in front of your eyes, past your eyes, while squeezing it as if you were milking a cow. Story 178. Chilean sea bass is really Patagonian toothfish, but we're sold the former because it has a more appealing name. No one will see this comment. Story 179. Time travel is just what you guys feel when you have a gap in your memory. It may feel like time is passing when you sleep, but actually, you have vivid dreams that your brain erases to free up space. Very rarely do you remember your dreams or gain self-awareness during it. But when you are aware of yourself in a dream, and you are aware you are dreaming, you might have fun for 8 hours in your imagination. Once you wake up, it's probably forgotten, like nothing happened, like you traveled in time. It's impossible to remember your entire dream. If you did, it might feel like you never went to sleep, like you went to a fantasy land. It's weird knowing that you might have horrible nightmares in your dreams, but you will never remember it. Or maybe worse, we are dreaming right now, and when we go to sleep is the real reality. Probably not, but it's a very fun brain tease. Story 180. NSFW. I found out recently that there are 2 penile configurations for men, grower and shower. Showers are approximate 34s of the population and have near full length when flaccid. Growers are approximate 14 of the population, and depending on the level of growth, can be gross several times its original length. And in some cases, a very aroused grower could even get an extra inch. I'm a grower. If a girl ever complains about my average-size male body part, I'll just say, well, maybe if you were hotter, I could give you an extra inch. Story 181. I have a few blues eyes in humans is a relatively recent mutation. A T-Rex would definitely still see you if you didn't move, because they weren't brain dead, and they had better visual acuity than even the most sharp-eyed eagles. Jack Daniels, founder and original maker of Jack Daniels whiskey, died by an infection via an infected toe after kicking his safe because it got jammed shut. There is a museum that has the killer safe on display. Story 182. Vietnamese worship whales and dolphins. Any whales or dolphins washed up dead ashore will be given a proper burial in their own cemetery. Story 183. The Phantom of Heilbronn, or the Woman Without a Face, the name given to a suspected serial criminal and mass murderer whose DNA was discovered during the investigation of more than 40 different crime scenes across France, Germany, and Austria over the course of 16 years from 1993 to 2009, including breaking and entering, burglary, substances use, gang violence, human trafficking, and suspected mob hits and executions, indicating an escalation of criminal activity over time. Among many others, the Phantom's DNA was linked to crime scenes including on a cup after the eliminate of a 62-year-old woman on 25-26 May 1993 in Idar Oberstein, Germany, on a kitchen drawer after the eliminate of a 61-year-old man on 21 March 2001 in Freiburg, Germany, on a syringe containing heroin in October 2001 in a wooded area near Gerolstein, Germany, on the leftovers of a cookie in a trailer that was forcefully opened on the night of 24 October 2001 in Budenheim, Germany, on a toy pistol after the 2004 robbery of Vietnamese gemstone traders in Arbois, France, on a projectile after a fight between two brothers on May 6, 2005 in Worms, Germany, on a stone used for smashing a window after a burglary on 3 October 2006 in Saarbrücken, Germany, after a March 2007 burglary at an optometrist store in Gallneukirchen, Upper Austria. After 20 burglaries and thefts of cars and motorbikes between 2003 and 2007 in Hesse, Baden-Württemberg, and Saarland, Germany, Tyrol, Austria, and Upper Austria, on a car used to transport the bodies of 3 Georgians eliminate on 30 January 2008 in Heppenheim, Germany, after a burglary on the night of 22 March 2008 in a disused public swimming pool in Niederstetten, Germany, after 4 cases of home invasion in Kirchheide, twice, Tholi and Rheol, Germany, in March and April 2008, after an apartment break-in in Oberstenfeld-Gronau during the night of 9 April 2008, after the robbery of a woman on 9 May 2008 in a clubhouse in Zarelsbach, in the car of an auxiliary nurse who was found dead at the end of October 2008 near Weinsberg, Germany. Forensic analysis of the DNA concluded the perpetrator was a female and of Eastern European and most likely Russian descent. A special German task force was created to track down the mysterious criminal, and in 2009, a reward of $300,000 was offered for clues leading to her capture. It wasn't until later that year that the case took an interesting turn. The female phantom's DNA was discovered in samples taken from the burned body of a male asylum seeker in France. Authorities quickly arrived at the conclusion that the phantom didn't exist at all, and the only likely explanation was one of the most prolific cases of DNA cross-contamination in forensic history. Upon further investigation, it was found that the testing supplies used in most and possibly all of the cases involved were purchased from the same Eastern European manufacturer, employing women that fit the phantom's description, and no doubt the original source of the DNA. Story 184. Pennsylvania Dutch isn't directly related to Dutch, it's derived from German. English speakers mistook Deutsch, German, for Dutch. There is a fast food chain in the U.S. called Wiener Schnitzel. It does not actually sell Wiener Schnitzel. It sells hot dogs. The first movie to play in Saudi Arabian movie theaters in the 21st century was the Emoji Movie. While sometimes disputed, the origins of the croissant can be traced to Austria, not France. The largest air force in the world is the U.S. Air Force. The second largest air force in the world is the U.S. Navy. During the battle for Castle Itter, Americans fought with a Wehrmacht unit, the Austrian resistance, and an assortment of former prisoners held by the SS. These included a tennis player, a former French prime minister, 2 former French commanders-in-chief, and Charles de Gaulle's older sister. They fought against an almost 200-man-strong Waffen-SS unit and won, even though they only had 38 people of their own. The Strange Alliance only had a single casualty. Story 185. The word short is longer than the word long, and the word long is shorter than the word short. Bruh, I just want to be part of the community. Story 186. When snail slugs go over copper, there's some certain reaction with the slime, and they get an electric shock. Story 187. Not the weirdest, but the first one I remembered. Honey will never go bad. Archaeologists even found some honey in pharaohs' tombs, and it could still be eaten. Story 188. When taking a shoot, for those who wipe with paper towels, there's 2 categories of people. Those who wipe standing up and those who wipe sitting down. It's almost a 50-50 ratio, and the best part is that a large majority of people doesn't know the other category exists. And from my experience, people have problems understanding the other category when they learn this fact. Team up. Story 189. The U.S. $1 bill is often called a buck. That's because when the U.S. finally created a standard currency that all the states would use, they didn't print enough early on. So people would use deer hide, buck hide, instead, since at the time it was worth about 1. Story 190. The human head remains conscious for 20 seconds after it's been decapitated, and you have around half of the bones in your entire body in your hands and feet. Story 191. Robbie Evil Knievel got his moniker when he was jailed in his youth next to a guy nicknamed Awful Knaffel. The jailer said something along the lines of, "Look who we've got, Awful Knaffel and Evil Knievel, and the rest is history." He did spell it evil since he didn't want to be considered evil. Story 192. The pH of a healthy female body part is slightly acidic, which gives it that tangy taste we all love. Story 193. Manatees has a private area that looks like a human private area, and that's why there's a folklore about mermaids. Story 194. I'm a hockey fan, So I have learned that the hockey player with the most Stanley Cup wins is Henri Richard with 11 wins. He played for the Montreal Canadiens. However, Henri was born on Feb 29th, leap year, which means at one point in his professional career, once he won his 9th Stanley Cup at 33 years old, he had actually had more Stanley Cup wins than real birthdays. Story 195. Hey guys, did you know that in terms of male human and female Pokemon breeding, Vaporeon is the most compatible Pokemon for humans? Not only are they in the field egg group, which is mostly comprised of mammals, Vaporeon are an average of 303 tall and 63.9 pounds. This means they're large enough to be able to handle human male body part, and with their impressive base stats for HP and access to acid armor, you can be rough with one. Due to their mostly water-based biology, there's no doubt in my mind that an aroused Vaporeon would be incredibly wet, so wet that you could easily have intimacy with one for hours without getting sore. They can also learn the moves Attract, Baby Doll Eyes, Captivate, Charm, and Tail Whip, along with not having fur to hide nipples, so it'd be incredibly easy for one to get you in the mood. With their abilities Water Absorb and Hydration, they can easily recover from fatigue with enough water. No other Pokemon comes close to this level of compatibility. Also, fun fact, if you pull out enough, you can make your Vaporeon turn white. Vaporeon is literally built for human male body part. Ungodly defense stathy HP pool acid armor means it can take cock all day, all shapes and sizes, and still come for more. Edit. Who the fudge gave this? The whole Somi Ard. And the helpful award. What the fudge? Story 196. I have a few your skin isn't fully attached to your body. That's how people would hook your skin and hang you by it as torture. Putting your butthole on a super strong drain can actually suck our organs out if strong enough. Your butthole is the same material as your lips, but since lips are always exposed, they act like dry rubber bands. Don't stretch much. Vertigo can leave you calico looking, black with white spots, or white with black spots. Early Egyptians were actually not from Egypt. When Ptolemy took over as first pharaoh, his Greek army joined him as residents of Egypt, so there were more Greek than Egyptian in Egypt, similar to the British invading America. Story 197. Poop transplants are a thing, but only people with the healthiest poop are eligible to donate their poop. They flush the good poop into the recipient's anus, and it actually does a good job of addressing whatever issue they had. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.